Chapter 7. False Trails. Marcia watched Terry Tarsal wrap up her new shoes in his special by-appointment to the extraordinary wizard gold tissue paper. "Thank you, Terry," she said. "You've done a lovely job." Terry glowed with pride. It wasn't often Marcia handed out praise. "It's been a real pleasure, Madam Marcia. It's always nice to do something special. I think the glitter really adds something to them, and I just adore the little bit of blue fur peeking out at the top. Inspired." Terry sighed as he put the neatly wrapped shoes into a smart gold box. "These have been a lifesaver. I've had 29 pairs of brown galoshes to waterproof for the Ramblings Roof Gardening Society. Highly depressing." "I can imagine," said Marcia. "Nothing worse than galoshes." "Especially brown ones," said Terry, tying his best bow around the box with the dark blue ribbon he kept for special customers. He handed the package to Marcia, who took it excitedly. "That will be half a crown, please." "Goodness!" Marcia looked shocked, but she handed over the exact money. It was worth it. Terry quickly put the money in the cash register before Marcia had the chance to change her mind. "Going somewhere nice this evening?" Marcia was. Milo Banda had asked her to accompany him to a new show at the little theater in the Ramblings. But she wasn't about to let Terry know. "That's for me to know and you to wonder, Mr. Tarsal," she replied. Feeling flustered at the thought of the evening, Marcia hurried off. The door threw itself open, and she rushed out. Splash! Terry Tarsal went pale. He knew exactly what had happened. It was the wretched kids next door. They had done it again. They had moved the puddle cover. Terry rushed outside to find his worst nightmare. His most prestigious customer was up to her neck in icy, muddy water right outside his shop. She didn't look too pleased about it. "Get me out!" spluttered Marcia. Terry was small and thin, but he was stronger than he looked. He grabbed hold of Marcia's arms and pulled hard. Marcia landed on Terry with a soft, obliterating thump. "Ugh!" gasped Terry. Marcia picked herself up, and like a large purple dog, shook as much water as she could off her magical cloak. Painfully, Terry crawled over to the puddle and extricated the gold shoebox, floating forlornly on top. He should have known that a week occupied by 29 pairs of brown galoshes was not going to end very well. Terry got to his feet. "I am so sorry, Madam Marcia. It's this blasted puddle. I've tried filling it in. You wouldn't believe the amount of trash I've put down there. But it just stays right there, a great big hole filling up with water. I don't understand. We shouldn't even have puddles at this time of year." Terry looked down at the soggy gold mess in his hands. "I'll make these as good as new for you, I promise." "Thank you," said Marcia, wringing out the furry hem of her cloak. "No chance of having them by this evening, I suppose?" "I'll work through until I've done them. What time are you going out?" 7:30, said Marcia without thinking. Terry smiled. "They'll be with you by then. I'll bring them to you. And once again, I'm so sorry." "Not as sorry as someone is going to be," muttered Marcia, as she dripped away along footpad passage, and bumped into the footpad communal snowman, which sported an uncomfortable pointy stick. Beetle climbed the wide white marble steps of the wizard tower. At the top he stopped to savor the moment. He turned and looked at the beautiful snowy courtyard with its freshly cleared path winding from the great arch to the foot of the steps. Beyond the high wall of the courtyard he could just see the snow-covered roof of the manuscriptorium, with its lazy skein of smoke from the blazing fire in the scribe's new sitting-room drifting skyward. Beetle felt indescribably happy, and only very slightly unsettled from having just bumped into Jenna. Pushing Jenna from his mind, he turned back and looked up at the huge silver doors that soared up above him. The wizard tower was particularly striking that morning. It was bathed in a shimmering silvery blue light, with delicate flashes of purple shooting across the surface. Beetle could scarcely believe that he was here, about to give the wizard tower password for the very first time, and that the magical doors would open just for him. He smiled and savored the moment just a little longer. "Forgot the password, Chief?" A cheery voice came from behind him. "No, Silas Heap bounded up the steps, his curly straw-colored hair disheveled as usual, and his green eyes smiling. Silas liked Beetle. "Allow me," Silas said, and before Beetle could say anything the double doors had swung silently open. Silas had taken his arm and marched him across the threshold. The words, "Welcome, Chief Hermetic Scribe," materialized at Beetle's feet, and then "Welcome, Silas Heap," flashed up and faded quickly. "Seal watch," said Silas in explanation. "A bit late, but you know what they say." Beetle hazarded a guess. "You're late? What time do you call this? Where on earth have you been?" Silas looked baffled. "No. Better late than never. Beetle watched Silas Heap head across the great hall toward the sealed lobby, and heard one of the guard wizards demand, "Silas Heap, where on earth have you been?" Beetle smiled and headed for the silver spiral stairs. He had an appointment to keep on the 20th floor. Marcia met Beetle at the door. She ushered him in, and for the very first time Beetle met the ghost of his ex-employer, Jilly Jin. Marcia put a warning hand on Beetle's shoulder. "Move across the room slowly. Try not to alarm her." The ghost stared at Beetle, taking in his chief hermetic scribe robes. She looked down at her own ghostly chief hermetic scribe robes, and then back at Beetle. A bewildered expression settled over her face like a fog, as she watched Beetle's careful, almost apologetic progress across the room. Beetle was very nearly out of the room when he stumbled against a small table, and caused Marcia's collection of fragile fairy pots to wobble. It was then that Jilly Jin, ex-chief hermetic scribe, realized that she was dead. She opened her mouth, and a great howl of grief came from deep within. "Ah!" The scream did not stop. Marcia hurried Beetle out and quickly closed the door. She looked pale and, Beetle now noticed, rather damp. Her dark hair was shiny and wet, hanging in tendrils about her shoulders. But before he had time to ask what had happened, Marcia ushered him into her study and closed the door against the desolate wail outside. Marcellus Pye was there, sitting on a small chair in front of the desk. He seemed, thought Beetle, a little tense. He was. Marcellus had just sent Septimus on an errand, and he had been about to check on the fire cauldron while he was away. Time was ticking by. "Thank you for coming at such short notice, Beetle," said Marcia. "He is not the only one who has come at short notice," Marcellus observed tetchily. "Beetle has not brought it upon himself, Marcellus, unlike you," Marcia riposted. Keeping her gaze on Marcellus, she said, "Beetle, perhaps you would like to show Mr. Pye the vent cooling system." By not even a twitch of a muscle did Marcellus betray any familiarity with what Marcia had said. His studied expression, 70% annoyance, 25% bemusement, 5% boredom, remained the same. Beetle took the gleaming white piece of paper out from his folder and laid it in front of Marcellus, who looked at it with no more than a natural curiosity. "What is this?" he asked politely. Marcia stabbed her finger onto the title. "Vent Cooling System," she read out very deliberately. "As you know, Marcellus." Marcellus picked up the sheet of paper and perused it. "How strange. It looks just like a spider's web." He looked up at Marcia. "And why do you think I know about this?" He glanced deliberately down at the title. "Vent Cooling System." Marcia fought down her mounting irritation. She had expected Marcellus to cave in when confronted with the diagram, or at least look guilty. Either he was a very good actor, or this actually was nothing to do with him. Marcia was not sure which. She stabbed her finger at the scrawled note at the foot of the page. "Because, Marcellus, you have written on it. There!" Very slowly, playing for time, Marcia suspected, Marcellus fished out his little round spectacles and put them on, carefully fitting the curled earpieces behind his ears. Marcia tapped her foot impatiently. Marcellus peered at the note. "Julius, FYI, vent cooling system. M," he muttered. "FYI. Very strange name." Beetle began to correct Marcellus, but Marcia held her hand up to stop him. Marcellus looked up at Marcia. "And no doubt you think that the M is for Marcellus." "Yes," said Marcia. A waver of uncertainty wandered into her voice. Marcellus scented victory. He smiled and put the paper down on the desk. "Well, I do hope you don't call me out to inspect every little note in the castle signed with the letter M. I shall be spending all my time going up and down Wizard Way. There must be so many notes out there from, let me see now, Milo, Morwena, Marissa, Maureen, Marcus." Marcia glanced at the mention of Marcus. Marcus Overland, ex-ordinary wizard, had once been given Marcia's extraordinary wizard robes by the Wizard Tower Laundry in error. He had paraded around the castle in them, acting very badly indeed. There were still people who were convinced that Marcia had once run screaming down Wizard Way, waving a large pair of bloomers above her head. "That's enough of that, Marcellus," Marcia told him. "There is no need to be sarcastic." "I was merely pointing out the infinite possibilities of the letter M," said Marcellus. Beetle watched with a mixture of admiration for Marcellus's cool head, and annoyance at how Marcellus was putting Marcia off. It was time for some straight talking. From his folder he took a translucent piece of paper on which he had marked the position of all the puddles, and placed it on top of the Venn diagram. "We had hoped you might be able to help us, Marcellus," he said smoothly. "For the last few weeks I have been monitoring a very strange occurrence. Puddles have appeared throughout the castle." Marcellus looked genuinely surprised, and then, Beetle was sure, a brief flash of panic crossed his face. Feeling more confident, Beetle continued. "At the beginning of the big freeze we had 9. My scribes have been checking on them daily, and despite temperatures well below freezing, they report that no puddle has frozen over. And then, 2 days ago, 4 more were reported. 2 appeared in scribes' back gardens, and 2 in iced-up alleyways. It is odd, don't you think?" "I suppose it is," said Marcellus, "but I don't know why you are telling me." Beetle pointed to the papers lying in front of them. "You will see that on this top tracing paper I have a map of the castle. On it I have placed a red dot where each puddle is." Beetle looked up at Marcellus. "There are 13 in all." "There would be," thought Marcellus grimly. "Indeed?" he said coolly. "Is 13 significant?" "You tell me," said Beetle. Marcellus said nothing. Beetle continued. "Now, if we place the tracing over the Venn diagram, like so, we can see that each red dot is on top of the end of a line on the diagram." "So it is," Marcellus murmured. "How very interesting." "And I presume each line ending is a vent." Marcellus shrugged. "Whatever a vent is." Beetle knew he had to keep cool, but it was not easy. Fighting to keep any vestige of irritation out of his voice, he continued. We believe that the note is indeed from you, and we believe that you wrote it to Julius Pike. FYI is, as I am sure you do actually remember, archaic shorthand for your information. Marcia and I are convinced that there is a connection between these puddles and the fire in the great chamber of alchemy. We would like an explanation as to why the puddles occurred before the fire has even been lit, before, in fact, the chamber was opened." For a few seconds Beetle thought he had done it. Marcellus sighed and said, "Indeed, there is a connection. Perhaps I may demonstrate." Beetle nodded. Marcellus took a pen and proceeded to add a series of thick black crosses to the red dots on Beetle's castle plan. He then joined them up so that they formed a wavy line that meandered from the south gate by the river to the wizard tower. "You will find that all these places will have melting snow," he said, looking at Beetle over the top of his spectacles. "You will also see that by no means all these spots have a vent beneath them, as shown on the diagram. It is an unfortunate coincidence that the ones you have found just happen to be above one of these vent things. Whatever there may be," he shrugged. "Coincidences happen." "Coincidences?" Marcellus took off his spectacles and looked up. "Dragon blood." "What?" "Dragon blood. After his fight with the dark dragon, Spitfire left a trail of blood from the south gate to the wizard tower. Each red dot, and now each cross, marks a spot of blood. You will find the snow has also melted at every cross I have drawn. I agree there is a link between the opening of the chamber and the melting snow, but only insofar as that the flight made by Spitfire led us being in the happy position of being able to do this at all." Marcellus looked at Marcia. "No doubt you know all about the eternal heat of dragon blood?" Marcia was not sure she did, but she was not going to give Marcellus the satisfaction of admitting it. "Of course I do," she snapped. Marcellus knew the interview was at an end. He took off his spectacles and put them back in their red velvet case. "Dragon blood is a wonderful thing, but it does have a tendency to lead to puddles in snow, which is most annoying for those who fall into them. I suppose your shoes were ruined, Marcia." "How did you know Marcellus stood up. He had won, and he wanted to get out of Marcia's study as soon as possible. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have important work to continue. I hope next time we meet it will be to do the job that we all wish to do. Denature the two-faced ring." Marcia opened the study door. "Yes, indeed." She took a deep breath and said, "I apologize for interrupting your work, Marcellus. I'll see you out." Beetle sat down with a sigh. Quietly he put the vent diagram and his tracing, now covered with taunting black crosses, back in his folder. He had made his first mistake as chief hermetic scribe. It was not a good feeling. Marcia returned without Marcellus. Beetle leaped to his feet. "Marcia, I am so sorry." "Nothing to be sorry about, Beetle," said Marcia. "It's all for the best. Marcellus knows we have our eye on him now. Please do not let this put you off. You must let me know about anything else suspicious. Anything at all." Beetle felt very relieved. Yes, of course I will. I will check out all the crosses he made." "Thank you, Beetle. Now I think we both have earned a strong cup of coffee." By the time Marcia escorted Beetle down the stairs, he felt a little less embarrassed about the interview with Marcellus. As they spiraled down into the vaulted space of the great hall, Beetle saw that something had caught Marcia's attention. Milo Banda was coming out of the duty wizard's cupboard. Beetle saw Milo catch sight of Marcia and stop dead. Milo dithered. It seemed to Beetle that Milo wanted to skip back into the cupboard, but was unsure whether Marcia had seen him. Marcia decided it for him. She jumped from the stairs and set off across the great hall at top speed. Beetle kept a tactful distance. Something was going on, but he wasn't sure what. Milo was floundering. "Marcia, how nice! Goodness, fancy seeing you here." Marcia looked confused. "I generally am here. This is where I live, and where I work." Yes, of course. What I meant was that I didn't expect to bump into you." "No?" "No. I, have some business here. A small project of mine." "Oh, you never said. I might have been able to help." No, I don't think so." "Oh. But of course, thank you for the offer. I do hope you understand," Milo said anxiously. "I didn't want to disturb you. I know how busy you are. That's why I came here in the mornings." "Mornings?" Yes. Hildegard said it was the best time." "Hildegard?" "Yes. But of course, if you prefer, I can see Hildegard other times." "It matters not a jot to me when you choose to see Miss Pigeon," Marcia said icily. "However, I will be having words with Miss Pigeon about using work time for social engagements." Marcia turned on her purple python heel and strode off. Milo caught up with her at the foot of the stairs. "But it's not a social—" Marcia glared at Milo. "I find that I have other commitments this evening. Double speed!" The stairs did Marcia's bidding and took her whirling upward. A distant scream followed by a thump came from somewhere far above, as a wizard was thrown off by the sudden change of speed. Beetle and Milo watched Marcia's purple cloak disappear. "Bother," Milo said. "Bother, bother, bother." "I'll second that," said Beetle. On the way back to the manuscriptorium, Beetle saw Jenna's distinctive red cloak going past the manuscriptorium, and he decided to take a detour to check out the nearest of Marcellus's crosses. After a fruitless hour, he discovered that the 3 closest to the wizard tower were not possible to verify. 2 were on top of roofs, and 1 was actually inside a building. He suspected that the others would be the same. Beetle walked slowly back to the manuscriptorium. He knew that Marcellus Pye was up to something. But what was it?